So what did you get on the ACT?
Let's go ahead and just keep that to us. We'll talk about that off camera.
on the next episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of The Next Degree. My name is Patrick Sheard and I am your host for this podcast. And this episode is special because I am joined by one of my great friends, Miss Stephanie.
Period. Great friends. Yes, I'm Miss Stephanie Rodriguez. I'm the program coordinator for Upward Bound over at Thornton.
And also, fun fact for those who don't know, but those who've been following us for a while, me and Miss Stephanie actually started the podcast 5 years ago when it was originally called College Declassified. So if you have a clip, Denzel, go ahead and put that clip in. But today we are talking about the ACT. So on March 31st in our area, our students are taking the actual ACT exam. And so we wanted to come on here and provide some tips and tricks and even talk about our time when we took the ACT, because it was some years ago when we took the test. But we wanted to provide tips and tricks to our students just so they can feel further prepared, so they don't feel some type of test anxiety. So Miss Stephanie, let's talk about when we took the test, right? Because I took the test back in 2012.
Wow, that was so long ago for you.
And it was a different format. Back then, we had to actually use the Scantron. Now it's a digital ACT. And honestly, when I took the test, I did not feel prepared whatsoever. Like, I took the ACT prep classes, but like, I wasn't prepared for it for real. So like, you know. But how did you feel like it was for you?
You did better than me because I didn't take any prep classes. And as a matter of fact, what I tell my students all the time is that I didn't even know the importance of the ACT. Same. I really didn't know and did not care. I was that type of student. It's so funny how I work with the best students now, and yet I was like one of the careless students back then. So like I would sit down, do what I could, and what I didn't know, I would guess, close the test and put my head down. I was ready to get out and go home. So very different experience for me.
I definitely feel the same because though I did take the prep classes, I didn't understand the importance of an actual ACT exam, because I think when you're in high school, yes, you're thinking about your future to some capacity, but you're not really thinking about how standardized tests could affect your future if you're planning on going to get a 4-year college degree. Right. So
we didn't have Talent Search. We didn't have Upward Bound. And we really didn't have a college and career counselor. Oof. Okay, to sit down and really talk to us about the importance of this exam. So I make sure that I talk about it with my students, and we do a lot of research on the best ways to take the exam, tips and tricks, and even help them with prep. One of the things that I do at the school is every week, I will get a passage, whether it be out of the reading, English, or science. I'll do it first. Whatever I get wrong, I use AI, I use YouTube, any type of resource that I can use to understand why I got it wrong, and then learn different ways to explain it to my students. And I do that because not only do you have to practice taking the exam, but you have to be aware of what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong and that type of thing. So I'm so glad we're doing this.
I think that kind of leads us into one of the most important tips when it comes to preparing for the ACT is actually practicing for the ACT. A lot of times students don't realize that there are free materials that is available for them to use. So like act.org/prep is a great resource to use because you can take practice quizzes, you can take a full-length exam, or you can even do like questions of the day where they'll ask you a question a day just to see your knowledge that you have in certain topics. So that's one of the most important tips. Prepare for the ACT as much as you can by taking practice tests and practice quizzes, because the more that you actually prepare for the test, the better your chances are of getting a high score. And also, a lot of times students don't realize, but when it comes to the ACT, if you get a good score on the ACT, that can garner scholarships for your college education. So that's something that I've been emphasizing. So kind of like how you will meet with the students in person to do it, I send out virtual quizzes every week to the students as well. And it will either consist of math quizzes, English quizzes, science quizzes, or reading quizzes, but it's coming directly from the ACT website. So it's not like I'm just pulling it out of thin air. It's from previous ACT tests.
Right. And one of the things we talk about often in doing our college research is using College Scorecard. .ed.gov. Okay.
Put the link below.
Link below. And we tell students to use this website not only to look at graduation rates, percentage of students in debt, but also if you scroll towards the bottom, you see two things. You see the acceptance rate and then the average SAT score for students who are or were already accepted into that school. And so what I tell my students is if you find your dream school and you're still a junior or freshman, sophomore, you have the opportunity to look at that average score and then try to shoot for that score so that your chances of getting into that school are better. And like you said, most schools will give you scholarships, will help you out financially wise when your SAT scores are great or ACT scores. But a lot of schools now are test optional.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of students ask, well, what's the point? It's for the money. That's
Exactly.
why.
But some schools are reverting back to test during the pandemic, a lot of them were saying we're going to move to test optional for the sole purpose of we're in a new environment with the COVID-19 pandemic. So it definitely is something that we're not requiring. But now that we're shifting away from COVID, now that COVID doesn't exist still, but we're shifting back into that test required mindset. And so it's important for students to understand if their dream schools are requiring you to have a good ACT score in order to get in.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about schools making the ACT a requirement?
I think it could benefit in a lot of ways, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to the students that score higher on the test are the students that prepare for it, right? Which also can show the school that, okay, this is a good student who cares about their education, right? Now we have had students that kind of passed it with high scores that really didn't really try and just somehow managed to guess right answers. But like it shows institutions that the students are caring about their education, which may show that they're going to care about their education at that 4-year level and not really slack off, So I like it. I'm not upset about it at all. I do think that will kind of affect some students who didn't have good scores, but that also may want to push students to retake it because they have the ability to retake the test if they didn't know, which is another tip. If you need to retake the ACT, you can retake the ACT. I know in our district, our school counselors have a fee waiver so they can retake the test for free. But after that fee waiver has been used, then you have to pay out of pocket to actually take the exam. So I recommend if you feel like when you get your ACT test scores back, definitely retake the test if you feel like that score could be a lot better. Because what's going to happen is that they'll take the higher of the two scores anyway.
Right. One of the things people don't talk about when talking about the ACT or SAT is rigor. There are a lot of students who are top 10, have gotten straight A's, A, B students, honor roll students for majority of their life. And then when it comes to testing, they're not testing at the level that they're supposed to be at. And so that really shows how well they can handle rigor. I mean, yeah, you might be doing good in school, but have you retained all of the information you were supposed to learn during high school? And so that's why it's very important to take it serious. Some of my students say, Miss Stephanie, I do not take the PACT serious because it's just practice. Okay, so then how are you going to know where you're really standing at? Right? And so that's one of the things we've been talking about because testing is right around the corner. And they'll say, yeah, I got a low score, but I didn't really try. Okay, so then how do you know how to prepare for it? Okay, so Mr. Sheard, we have tips on our page.
Yes.
Let's run through some of these. Tell me which ones are your favorite and which ones you think are the most important.
So one of the favorite tips that I have is again, emphasizing that practice, right? If you haven't studied for the ACT, it's important that you at least take a full-length exam or a time diagnostic test, because it gets you into the mindset of actual test day, which especially when it comes to the time diagnostic test, because with that test, it lets you know these were the areas that you were weak in, and this is where you can improve on, right?
Now, Mr. Sheard, is it smart to start studying for the ACT a month before the ACT?
No. You want to study as early as you possibly can. So typically it's recommended to study at least 3 to 6 months in advance. That way you can regurgitate the knowledge, but also you can spread it out to where you're not cramming all the information at once. So I always recommend studying as much as you can 3 to 6 months in advance. If you don't have 3 to 6 months and you have a little less than a month, there are still ways that you can actually still prepare for the test. So it's not like if you haven't studied yet, it's not like you are out of luck. You can still prepare for the test now and still garner a good score. But it's important that you at least give yourself enough time to study so you're not cramming all of that information in at once.
Absolutely. One of the tips that I see on here that I really like is in the English section, prioritize consciousness and grammar. Students should know that when in doubt, the most concise answer is often correct. OMG, I talk about this all the time. So we have moved from learning grammar to really just taking an English exam, like one passage, and then talking about grammar rules that we find within those questions, which a lot of times is always giving the most concise answer. What is the shortest, quickest, and most grammar correct way to answer? And when you take the English portion of the exam, kind of make a list of all of the grammar rules you are seeing, and you will find out that they're practically the same. They're basically asking you the same question over and over. It's just in different passages. And so that's one of the things that we have been focusing on. What are those grammar rules that you are seeing consistently when you're taking the English portion of the exam? And like I said, most concise answer is always the right one.
But a lot of the time, sometimes students don't understand that on the ACT English section, there will be an answer that says no change. And they're going to see that periodically throughout the test. And sometimes we're so hardwired to pick the fancier looking option when it comes to how things should be said. But a lot of the times the answer is already correct and you don't have to make that change.
And it's never the fancier, longer version. I've never seen it be that. If anything, again, most concise always wins. What is the shortest way to say something? Least redundant.
You've heard it here, folks. Not the fancier option is always the best option. If you see that no change, that may just be the correct answer.
Okay, let's talk about the science portion. Because that is one that gets my students anxious. Like they might as well have a panic attack in front of me when we start doing science. So what do you have to tell us?
With the science section, you want to focus on data. You're not trying to focus more so on facts, right?
Absolutely.
So students do panic because they don't know science topics, but the section isn't actually testing. It's a test of logical reasoning, right? So with the science section, you're going to see a lot of graphs. You're going to see a lot of data sets, right? And it's mainly about you interpreting what that information is saying. And it's not necessarily about trying to memorize scientific fact. It's just about looking at the data that's presented to you and answering the questions. And a lot of the times, the biggest thing that you have to do is read the question.
Absolutely. Fun fact, only 10 to 15% of the questions on the science ACT portion require prior knowledge.
Another tip that you didn't know.
Yes, when they open that section and see all of these tables, they're like, Miss Stephanie, I don't know how to do this. And if I'm being honest, I think a lot of it is laziness. They don't feel like sitting there reading the question and looking for the answer. And so I like to break it down, take it slow, especially during the practice era, because when you're taking the exam, it's timed. But when you're practicing, I like to take my time with my students. I know that we have to practice timeliness, but I like to take my time with them because it shows them this stuff is not as hard as you think it is. You open it and you get overwhelmed with all of these graphs, all of these tables, and all of these numbers, but the answer is simple. Like, read it, slow down, relax too, because I think when people get so overwhelmed, they're not able to think straight. And so I always tell them the science portion is probably one of the easiest portions of the ACT because the answer is already there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now let's move on to the math. Now, what are some things that you can talk about when it comes to the math section of the ACT?
Oh my God. I have a student who is a mathematician, and one of the things that he told me was, Miss Stephanie, you have to teach student rules on how to use the least math possible. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he was like, yeah, I mean, like when thinking about Pythagorean theorem, sometimes you don't need to do Pythagorean theorem if you know your 30, 60, 90 triangle rules. And I was like, okay, I catch what you're saying. And so what he was telling me was that he will look up math rules that will allow him to shorten the time that he spends on the math section, which means I don't have to use my calculator because I know that if this angle is this, then, you know, the hypotenuse is half of this, whatever. And so that's something that I've been focusing on with students and just kind of researching what those math rules are. And of course, knowing your formulas. I know that they give out specific formulas, but not all of them.
Yeah. And so like the math section, it's mainly a lot about using diagrams and using logic. So like using your calculators wisely, right? Especially when it comes to problems that can be solved without them and you don't necessarily need to use that calculator. So if you're stumped when it comes to geometry, like Miss Stephanie said, then you should examine the provided diagram and choose the most logical answer based on the actual visual. Again, if you know your triangle rules, it could be a lot easier when it comes to that math section. So again, when it comes to like these sections, the whole thing is to not overthink it. You know more than you think that you know. And so really taking that time. Yes, it is timed. You typically have a minute per question on the math section. But taking the time to really examine the diagrams and use the logic to help when it comes to solidifying your answer.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about reading. Everyone's favorite. I know some students will say, Miss Stephanie, I read it and I don't know what's going on. Log in. Okay. One of the best tips when doing the reading portion is skimming first, then target, right? You want to get the bigger picture of what the passage is saying. So skimming the passage, then going back to read the question, and then going back to the passage, right? If needed. Sometimes it's not needed. Sometimes it's a grammar question. But make sure to skim first.
And a lot of the time when it comes to the reading section specifically, a certain question would be highlighted or underlined or italicized. So where you can know, okay, well, this is matching up with this part of the text, right? So like Miss Stephanie said, it's important to skim first, get the main idea of what the passage is saying, and then go to the answers. But the good thing is you will still have the passage right next to you.
Right.
So like if you need to jump to the questions and then kind of jump back and forth between the passage and the questions, you have the freedom and the capability to do that. But skimming first and then targeting the correct answer, or at least targeting the answer that you feel is, again, concise and correct. Okay. Period. Now, one thing that I really wanted to talk about was leveraging AI to help when it comes to studying.
Let's talk about it. You know what? Some of my students hate AI. What about yours?
Some of my students love AI.
Ooh, my students are like so smart and want to prove themselves that they're like, I don't need AI. I'm like, but let me show you how you can use it.
Exactly. AI is a tool that's going to be here regardless. And it's going to keep evolving as time progresses. So why not use it to student benefit? Right. So for those who are unaware, there is this beautiful resource called Notebook LM. Notebook LM is a great resource to use to help when it comes to studying the ACT, because you can
not our sponsor.
Not a sponsor. Okay. Not a sponsor. But with Notebook LM, you can feed Notebook LM with test prep material.
Yep.
So like, let's say, for example, a teacher provided you with a packet and you could provide input that packet into Notebook LM and it could regurgitate in any type of way that you need it. So whether you need it as an infographic, whether you need it as a video, a podcast,
a
or whether
map,
you need
a mind map,
flashcards, short quizzes, it has the power to create that for you. So then that way it can kind of help when it comes to learning the material as well.
Yeah.
So really leveraging the use of AI to help when it comes to preparing for the test.
And that goes for studying as well. You not only the ACT, but if you have a test coming up, let's say psych, because a lot of my students struggle with those psych exams because a lot of it is memorization. You can give Notebook LM all of your notes and have it test you. They even make a podcast.
That's my favorite part. Honestly, the podcast helped me so much when I was in grad school, especially when it was definitely time for those midterms and final exams. So I use that podcast and I use Notebook LM
Okay, go
very
to the gym,
religiously.
pop that podcast in your ear
Okay.
and learn something.
Now let's go ahead and move on to like the non-section specific tips. So first things first that I always want to talk about is prioritizing the weakest link, right? If for students that may have a 2-week window, which again, we're about 2 weeks from our ACT, you should spend roughly 1 hour daily on the most problematic section while doing light maintenance on your stronger subjects, right? So a lot of the time, some students will prep and say, okay, well, I'm good at this. Let me just make sure I'm strong in a certain area. But it's important that you emphasize the areas that you are weaker in, right? Because if you don't emphasize that, then you're never going to get stronger in those areas. So if you're like, I'm struggling with the Pythagorean theorem in math, I can't get the formulas correct, right? Why not? Why focus on geometry? Why focus on something else that you're good at instead of focusing on the thing that you're kind of weaker at?
Makes sense.
Because
to me.
that way it's best to practice the thing that you're struggling at so you can get better at it. And then that way you're good at 2 different areas, right?
Period. Okay, question.
Yes.
It's the final week. Should I learn new material?
No.
Talk about it.
If it's the final week leading up to the actual test, you should not try to cram more information in because, again, with cramming that information in at the last possible second, it doesn't give you time to really regurgitate it, really memorize it, or even really practice it. So I think the final week leading into the ACT should just be reviewing the material that you've already been going over, or again, working on the material that you are weakest in. How do you feel about that?
Or just practicing your timing too. At this point, it's cooked. If you don't know the Pythagorean theorem, just skip it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But focus on reviewing your notes. Okay. Common mistakes that you've made when you took practice tests. And also, when it comes to test taking strategies, make sure it's important that you are confident in yourself. Because here's the thing. A lot of students don't realize it's really a mind game, right? This is information that you've learned in your classes already throughout your entire high school career. So it's not anything new that's being introduced to you.
Yes. And also, as much as we emphasize the importance of the ACT, who cares? Go take it, do your best. And if you didn't get the score you wanted to, take it again. It is not a problem. It is not the end of the world.
And then also, timing is important. Okay. ACT is a high pressure situation. Okay. And the test is timed. So it's important that you practice when it comes to time allocations. Typically you have about 30 seconds per question for the English section and 1 minute for the reading, science, and writing section per question, right? So you want to make sure that you are practicing your time allocation, really working with your teachers to kind of help when it comes to that. Because a lot of teachers do ACT prep. I know a lot of my students at Thornton are letting me know, like, our math teacher has been doing ACT prep all year. And I'm like, that's great. That's what she's supposed to be doing to prepare you for the test.
Absolutely. And if not, do it at home. If you go on the ACT website, they do provide, I can't say this enough. They provide full, complete test of this year, 25, 26. Okay, so you can go on there, download them, ask somebody to print them out for you. If you're one of my students, I will do it for you for the free ski. And take it, time yourself, and then go back and look at what you got right. What did you get wrong? Whatever you got wrong, go talk to your teacher about it. Okay, I didn't get this math question correct. Go talk to your math teacher about it and see what you can get better at.
Your teachers are here to help you. They again should have been spending majority of their year teaching you the material that's going to be on the ACT. So ask questions for things that are confusing to you. Another thing that I want to talk about is using the skip and return method. Don't waste your time on one question. Again, each question is timed specifically. So if you find yourself getting to minute 2 or 3 on one question, you may want to skip it for right now and then return later, but never leave a question unanswered.
Absolutely. Pick a letter of the day, and that's just basic, what do they call it? I don't know, basic math. Pick one. If you stick with B, one of those is going to land. And do what you know and guess on what you don't. Okay.
I remember when I was in chemistry my sophomore year of high school, my one teacher, she said, typically in a lot of science quizzes and tests, the answer is C in science. Why? I don't know why. But she said it was C. So take that if you want. If you want it to be science, let it be C.
Let it be your letter of the day. All right, we're at the end. Let's talk about the night before, okay? Should I stay up all night on the game?
No. You want to make sure that you give yourself adequate rest when it comes to the ACT the night before. Typically, it's recommended that you get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, which is typically the requirement in general, but especially before a test day, because it gives your body enough time to rest. It gives your brain enough time to rest. But also when you stay up, you're becoming more anxious, and that tired and that sleepiness that you feel if you stay up is only going to harm you. It could fog your brain when it comes to actually taking the test and you picking a wrong answer.
Right. Also, breakfast. I know a lot of people are not breakfast people. It's too early in the morning. I'm not hungry. But you want to have energy. And so that means drinking some water, taking some crackers, a granola bar, whatever it is. Make sure you have it in your pocket, because it is going to be a long day. And if you start getting hungry, your mind is just fogged at that point. Yeah.
And we emphasize breakfast, eating something that's good in protein, that's very rich. Don't overeat, because again, you only get a couple of bathroom breaks throughout the test.
Stomach's gonna be.
So don't overeat, but at least eat a nice balanced meal just so you have enough energy throughout the day.
Absolutely. Well, I think we covered everything.
We did.
So what did you get on the ACT?
Let's go ahead and just keep that to us. We'll talk about that off camera.
on the next episode.
Miss Stephanie, is there any last minute motivational tips that you would like to give for the students, or any words of encouragement as we are wrapping up this episode?
Don't stress about it too much. I know that sounds crazy. Again, we've been talking about the importance of it, but okay, so you didn't get the score you wanted. All right, let's move on. Let's take it again and let's practice for it. And also, don't start studying for it the last minute. I mean, it might be too late for those that are taking it this year, but for those that are sophomores, freshmen, start now, okay? Don't let junior year be the year you think I'm going to get prepared for the ACT. It's almost too late.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's about it.
It's about understanding the concepts. It's not necessarily about trying to locate exactly this specific right answer.
It's just getting used to it, getting comfortable taking an exam like that, so that you're also not freaking out.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal. I mean, it is, but it's not.
But I would say my biggest tip as we wrap up again, practice makes perfect. There are test prep materials that's available to you via the ACT website. Utilize those, because that's what's only going to help you when it comes to getting a higher score. But like Miss Stephanie said, don't stress out about it. It is another standard. It is another test that you have to take, right? If you get a score that you aren't necessarily the biggest fan of, you can retake the test. And that's the beauty of it.
And a lot of schools actually provide fee waivers for those that want to take the exam again. So I know at the school that I work at, they provide those. So
awesome. Well, Miss Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
You're totally welcome.
This was great for me. This just brought me back to 5 years ago when we were doing College Declassified. So I really appreciate you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
And until next time, make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms at Facia Trio, and we will see you next time.
Period.
Take care.